Chapter 10 The Lords of Jenova.
Aerith and her companions stared at the castle. Something about the castle and its surroundings made it much more eerie than any previous castle that the princess has ever seen. Her home was warm and inviting. Cloud's was pleasant and beautiful, but this castle was simply creepy. Before them there was a pair of large white doors that reached around 10 feet tall. Aerith studied the door for a moment before turning to her friends.
It seems like there was no other way inside.
Perhaps we could sneak in through a window. I highly doubt the lord of this castle will kindly let you see Prince Cloud.
Aerith looked up and shook her head.
There is no way I will be able to climb the wall.
So you believe that knocking will help?
I have no other choice.
Aerith reached up and knocked as loud as she could on the door. She then stepped back and waited. When no one answered, Aerith looked at Red 13 and shrugged. She knocked again and still no answer. When she reached for another round of knocks, a shadow descended upon her. The three spun around. Standing before her was the most intimidating man she had ever seen. Ghostly pale skin, jade green eyes, long waistling silver hair, and garbed in black clothes was the lord of the castle.
Are you the master of this castle?
Aerith bravely asked, and yet she hardly knew the answer. The man eyed her suspiciously.
I am Princess Aerith, and I have come here to inquire the whereabouts of Prince Cloud.
The man smirked. He knew exactly where Cloud was.
You waste your time here, Princess. I know very well who you are, and you will not cross the threshold of my castle.
Please, Your Highness, Cloud is my fiancé.
He smirked again, studying her closely. The man frightened her more than any beast she had ever faced on her journey. While those beasts were powerful, this man was power. It radiated off him like a dark wave. She found herself trembling in his gaze.
Cloud is my slave now, and you are no longer his intended. Now go home to your mother and father, little girl.
Aerith clenched her fist. She disliked it when someone called her little or a child. Yet now she knew Cloud was indeed here, and she could not give up, not even to such an intimidating man.
I will not,
she stated loudly, surprising her two companions as well as herself.
Cloud is the man I will marry. I demand that you allow me to see him.
Aerith nearly regretted her words when she felt the Lord grab her face, holding her tightly. Aerith grimaced while Red 13 growled in warning. The silver-haired man ignored the red beast as well as Kate Sith, who was more so cowering behind Aerith's leg. He forced her to look him in the eyes. The princess whimpered.
You are either very brave or very foolish to speak to me in such a way in my kingdom. I suggest you hold your tongue, or you might end up at the bottom of the lake.
He let go, making Aerith stumble backwards.
Go home, child.
I will not leave until you allow me to see Cloud.
Suddenly a black wing sprouted from his back. Aerith fell back against the castle doors in shock.
Then, my dear princess, you will be waiting forever.
The silver-haired man launched himself into the sky and disappeared from sight. Several of his black feathers fell to the ground. When they landed, they dissolved into dust and blew away in the breeze. Aerith let out a breath she had been holding before looking back at her companions.
Princess, are you alright?
Aerith nodded.
I cannot believe you spoke to the son of Jenova, Sephiroth, in such a way.
I must be a complete fool to even try and challenge him. He would never let me enter to his castle. How can I even pretend to friend him? He could see right through me. I was so frightened by him.
Maybe you can give him something of great value.
He is a king. We would have nothing that would be of interest to him.
Aerith rubbed her temples in frustration. She had nothing aside the trinkets that Cloud had given her, and by the look of this castle, they would not be worth anything to Sephiroth. The three sat pondering what to do when Cait Sith snapped his fingers. Red 13 and Aerith looked at the little cat who was grinning.
I have an idea.
10 minutes later, Aerith found herself on the other side of the lake with her companions. She was shaking her head, her face as red as a ruby. Red 13 was growling angrily at the little cat. Cait Sith, on the other hand, was trying to sound reasonable. The little cat had suggested that since there was nothing of material value to offer, that they use the other thing to barter with. The thing, however, turned out to be the princess herself. Cait Sith suggested that Aerith use her feminine charms to entice the Lord of Jenova. When Aerith declared her charms would not work well since the Lord already brushed her aside, Cait Sith suggested she use her physical appearance to entice him.
I cannot do this!
It's degrading!
But you said there is nothing to trade. Well, this is the only other option.
Aerith wanted to argue. She did not want to go ahead with Cait Sith's plans. His plan involved the young princess to strip into nothing and bathe in the lake water. Yet what else could she do? She looked at her pet for an answer, but he could not come up with another.
I cannot believe I am doing this.
Bugenhagen said you must be willing to give up yourself.
She hugged her arms around her, her face still burning red. Was it the only way? She could not think of another, and she was sure that neither her nor her pets could sneak inside. Regardless, she hated the idea. Aerith stared at the lake. Even though the sun was out, the water would be freezing. She looked back at her faithful pet who nodded reassuringly at her. Cait Sith gave her a thumbs up to reassure her that he too was watching over her. The princess took a deep breath and removed her cloak, hanging it on a nearby branch. She kicked off her boots and slowly began to undo the buttons on her dress. Red 13 turned his head away as Aerith stripped off her clothing. Cait Sith would have continued to watch her had Red 13 not smacked the cat with his paw. The warm sun kissed her skin as she hung her dress on a branch of a tree near the lake. Once completely naked, Aerith stepped into the water.
It's freezing!
You can do this, princess. You're doing it for Cloud.
With Cloud in mind, Aerith slowly entered the water. Once submerged from the chest down, Aerith breathed. She undid the braid in her hair, letting the locks fall down, sprawling down to the water. Her hair provided a shield for her naked body. She moved her hands together, cupping them. She got a scoop of the water and let it fall on her head. She winced at how cold the water was, surprised her entire body was not numb.
So cold.
Yet she continued splashing the water over her body. 10 minutes went by as Aerith bathed. Red 13 laid at the edge, his eyes carefully scanning the area. Cait Sith's idea seemed ludicrous, but if it allowed her entry into the palace, then she had to do it. Aerith bathed silently, her mind thinking only of Cloud. She wanted to save him and to have him forgive her. Even if he shunned her forever, she wanted to say she was sorry for breaking her promise. Being so absorbed in her thoughts, Aerith did not see a man approach the bank. Red 13, however, sensed him. He was watching him suspiciously.
Maiden.
Spinning around in the water. Her arms hugged her chest to avoid any exposure. The man before her looked similar to Sephiroth, only with much shorter hair that came to his chin. They had similar eyes and even wore similar black leather clothing. Aerith sunk slightly into the water, feeling vulnerable. His eyes were scanning her, devouring her beautiful, innocent image.
What is such a fair maiden doing out here? In this lake, no less.
I am washing myself.
Come out of that cold water, my dear, and I will take you to a palace where you will bathe in warmth.
Aerith looked over at Seth, who was shaking his head. The man before her was staring with such intensity that it made the young princess greatly uncomfortable. She thought for a moment. She had to be clever. She could see the lust swelling inside the man, and it sickened her. His eyes lowered from her face to the simple chain resting around her neck, and then lower. She could use this to her advantage. She turned away, uninterested.
No, I am bathing, so I may be presentable for the man I am engaged to.
She held out her hand so that he could see the ring clearly on her left-hand ring finger. The man before her pondered her words.
And where is this fiancé to leave you in such a place?
Aerith pointed towards Sephiroth's castle. The man before her inclined his head, and his eyes widened slightly. Realization hit him. He now knew exactly who this woman was and who her fiancé is.
Might I be able to persuade you to join me inside?
Only if I am able to see my future husband.
I'm afraid that is impossible.
Aerith turned to look at him, her eyes showing determination.
Then I'm afraid I have no reason to speak to you any further.
She submerged herself completely, brushing off the silver-haired man. If he would let her into the castle, there would be no way he would allow her near Cloud. When she re-emerged, the man was gone. Aerith sighed and swam towards the bank.
Why did you not go with him?
He asked, handing clothing to her.
Because if I did, there was no guarantee I will be able to see Cloud. For I know, I could be locked up in a tower or something. Besides, that man had no good intentions if I were to leave with him.
Lust, I could sense his desires for you, my princess. Be wary of him.
Aerith finished dressing.
Agreed. But it is him who I believe will allow me to enter to the castle and to Cloud.
Inside his castle, Sephiroth was sitting on his throne, enjoying a drink and some food with his brothers, Laz and Yazoo. Both of the brothers looked extremely similar in appearance with the same hair, eyes, and pale skin. The only differences were Laz's short hair and chiseled features, and Yazoo having soft features and hair down past his shoulder blades. Both men also sported black leather garments. The three men were enjoying their food courtesy of their new servants when the doors to the throne room opened. Sephiroth shifted his jade-green eyes to the third and youngest brother walking down in length of the room. He was the man who only moments ago had spoken to the princess by the lake. Sephiroth lifted his chalice and drank deeply from it before he acknowledged his brother fully. His younger brother bowed at the waist out of respect.
Sephiroth, brother. I need a word.
Sephiroth looked at his other two brothers. He nodded and they took their leave. Once the middle two brothers left the throne room, Kadaj spoke freely.
The princess is here.
I am well aware. I have had the pleasure of speaking to her, and I assure you she is of no threat to me.
I desire her.
Kadaj, you are a fool.
Kadaj's eyes narrowed at his older brother. Unlike his older and calmer brother, Kadaj had a shorter fuse and did not like to be called a fool.
I want her to be mine.
Sephiroth stood and walked over to the window overlooking the lake. He spotted the princess and her companions on the far edge of the lake doing nothing of importance.
It's best to ignore her. She only wants her prince.
Brother, I have never desired something so much. She is a maiden and different from any other woman I have seen.
A maiden in every sense, but she will not come to you or your bed.
brother,"
Kadaj said, determined to have his brother see things his way.
"She wears the white materia around her neck. I have seen it. The Wolf Prince had given it to her, obviously for safekeeping."
Sephiroth turned to his brother, skeptical.
"I have seen it."
Sephiroth turned back towards the window, staring out at the princess. His mind was whirling with thoughts. Kadaj grinned, realizing his brother was now pondering this. He knew his older brother wanted the white materia, for it was a sacred relic that was powerful. A relic that he had wanted from the Wolf Prince from the moment he cursed him. Yet when the prince became his slave, he did not retrieve the materia as expected, but now knew the reason why. Cloud had given it to her. And since Aerith was not under the curse, the materia remained out of his reach. Kadaj joined his brother at the window. He knew his brother wanted the materia and would do anything to have it. Of course, the princess has to give it willingly to him as well.
"Give me the princess for my bride, and you shall have your materia, brother."
We must be careful, though. Very careful. She is fully determined to rescue Cloud. So much she even had the courage to attempt to stand up to me. She has a strong will, however.
"I have a plan, brother."
Sephiroth arched an eyebrow as his younger brother proceeded to tell him his plan. Out by the lake, Aerith had finished braiding her hair when Kadaj returned. He was grinning at her, which made the princess quite uncomfortable. She shifted in her spot as Red 13 moved closer to her.
"I have an offer for you, my dear maiden. It will allow you entry to my brother's castle.
I'm listening.
I will allow you to see your fiancé for 3 nights. Only during the night you are allowed to visit him. He will be asleep when you enter the room. If you are his true love, you will have the power to awaken him. If you can awaken him, he and his servants are free to go. However, if you fail, he remains my brother's slave. Are you willing to take my offer?"
Aerith looked at Kate Sith and Red 13. Both of them nodded. She looked back at Kadaj, standing up. She would have accepted right then and there, but Kadaj held out a finger revealing more of the deal.
"However, I must mention that every night you spend with your fiancé, you must pay a price that I deem worthy."
And those would be?
Your engagement ring, your necklace, and...
Kadaj moved forward, suddenly taking her chin in between his thumb and forefinger. Aerith winced as Red 13 let out a warning growl. Kate Sith himself went on the defensive, ready to whip out a set of his dice at any moment.
your hand in marriage.
A collective gasp escaped the three. Kadaj's eyes narrowed slightly, enjoying the surprised look upon her face. He let go of her chin and Aerith took a step back. Kadaj held out a hand to her, for her to shake.
Do we have a deal?
Aerith looked at the waiting hand. This would be the only way to save Cloud. She remembered Bugenhagen's words ringing in her ears. She had to be willing to give herself up to save Cloud. She was determined to do anything to do so. She lifted her right hand and grasped the silver-haired man's hand. The two hands closed, and the two shook firmly, sealing the deal.
I accept.